This meeting will now come to order. The clerk will please call the roll.
Mayor Carlett.
Here.
Vice Mayor Edwards.
Here.
Councilmember Patena.
Here.
Councilmember Binsbacher.
Here.
Councilmember Finn.
Here.
Councilmember Hunt. Here. And Councilmember Leone.
Yeah.
Thank you. Please rise for a moment of silence and the Pledge of Allegiance led by Councilmember Leone. Good evening and welcome to the Peoria City Council special meeting of March 29th, 2016. We will begin the first of our budget meetings this evening, fiscal year 2018 budget presentation, and I will turn it over to City Manager Carl Swenson.
It's always hard to think of those years, right?
Yes.
You know, we have these, because of our budget calendar, it's 18 already in terms of our budget, but thank you. And as you mentioned, Mayor Carlett, this is the first of two meetings we've got scheduled, and if the council needs or wants more time, we're certainly able to do that. And as always, we're happy to get questions from council members outside of the meeting format as well. So anything that comes up that you'd like to talk about, we're always eager to do that. After each budget year, we talk about, with the council, about the process. And each of the last 2 years, you have said that you have liked the process that we have used. And so we are about doing that again, obviously. And so what we'll be doing this evening is going through tonight most of the operating budget. Then tomorrow night we'll get into the utility budgets, utility rates, the capital budget, which is always, of course, of an interest to the council and citizens, and then the budget wrap-up tomorrow night. So tonight is working through the operating budget. And we'll use the same format in terms of presentations that we've used in the past, where I'll give a little bit of an introduction to each of the subject areas, and then Katie and Barry will drill down a little more, probably mostly Katie, will be presenting and drilling down a little bit more on some of the details within the budget and the changes from last year to this year. Now, on that point, as I mentioned in the overview when we presented the budget, because of what I referred to as the headwinds that we were dealing with in terms of constrained revenue, as you know, and I know you've received the budget and gone through it, there aren't a lot of changes. There aren't many changes from last year to this year, primarily because we did not have a lot of discretionary revenue or new revenue, and so we applied that revenue to those priority areas, those policy priority areas that you had spelled out for us. And so I think we've responded to that in how we have laid out the little bit of additional revenue we've had. But we'll talk about that as we move through it. But just so you know, you're not seeing a lot of change year over year from last year to this year. So, of course, we always begin with council policy goals, and we won't repeat all of the information that we gave when we presented the budget earlier, but it's worth noting because it's real important to us, and it's, I think, a strength of the form of government and our adherence to the form of government that you, as the elected leaders of the city, develop those policy goals that I and the staff then infuse into every aspect of the operations, and including and importantly the budget. So we use those policy goals as a real touchstone to make sure that we're achieving those things that you want. It's the compass point, if you will, for the city, and we want to make sure that we do everything we can so that you get to where you want to go as the elected leaders of the city. And I believe that we have done that. So we look at a number of the things that you have spelled out as priorities, and one of those that you have spoken about in some different venues since your policy goal-setting workshop were those recommendations that came from the Livability Initiative. That group of employees that came to the council policy workshop and gave you some recommendations on some exciting ideas that they have for the city, and you wholeheartedly embrace those, and we have put those in the budget as well. Now, none of them are really big-ticket items, so to speak, so they're not spelled out as tomorrow night when Andy Granger goes through the capital improvement program. You're not going to see millions of dollars attached to some of these, but they're important nonetheless, where they're infused in different things that we're doing in the budget. So I just wanted to note them here at the outset. So we have bike lane improvements that we'll be working on. We have continuing bus route and bus shelter improvements as a high priority, connecting small businesses and entrepreneurs within the city, building existing social media and online presence, customized neighborhood and community events, and showcasing Peoria's history. So those things are infused in different parts of the budget, and we'll note those as you would like going through. Also, financial planning, as we mentioned the other night, is a huge priority. We are sure that we are being efficient in the use of our resources. We're always working to sustain service delivery against changes and fluctuations and adjusting to community needs. So when we see changes in the community, we react to that, we report to you on that, and we also make sure that we are maintaining our assets in ways that protect and assure that our investments are being taken care of over the long haul. And finally, we have a good credit rating. We maintain that, and that's important to us when we go to the bond market, that we can get a good cost of money when we need to do that. So we take care of those financial principles. The policy items that we've talked about. Oh, I guess this is yours, Katie. I'm supposed to stop now. So we'll get our rhythm here pretty soon when we get going. So I just could give the whole presentation.
He could. Thank you. I wanted to just take a quick moment and talk about just a couple of the major budget policy items that hopefully you're looking at and thinking about and considering as you consider the budget. And I'm just going to touch on that this certainly isn't all of them, but some of the bigger ones. How well does the budget express your expectations regarding community priorities, regarding the level of taxes, rates, and fees that are set, regarding the services the city provides and the service levels of which we provide those, the different capital projects, are we meeting your highest priority needs in capital projects? About our employee compensation and benefits, are those meeting your expectations as well, and are they adequate? And are you comfortable with the funding recommendations that we're putting forward as we review the budget? So really, I think this is just kind of a good reminder of kind of what you're looking at as council when you're reviewing the budget at the policy level. Then we're going to go ahead and go through the department overview. So how we're going to work this is Carl's going to spend a little bit of time on the front end of each of the overviews, and then I'll talk, as he mentioned, a little bit more about some of the details. And certainly if there are questions you have about those areas, please feel free to ask those questions at the time we're talking about them, or you certainly can wait till the end if you would like.
So it's back to me.
Yeah.
Okay. And as you know, we like this to be as conversational as possible. While Katie and I have slides, as we've done in past years, anytime you have a question or want us to stop and respond to something, don't hesitate to jump in. So the first area that we'll go through is leadership and management. And this, of course, as the name delineates, are the budgets for you, for the elected officials, and for city management, the city manager's office, the government affairs area, and the economic efficiency and sustainability program, and that, of course, is LISA. And we typically shorten that to just sustainability, but it's a lot more than that. And this is, as the name implies, is that leadership element. So it's important to keep funded at a level that's necessary to support your activities and the activities of me and my staff as we are providing the important oversight and accountability within the city government. There are only very modest changes within this budget, no personnel changes, anything of that nature. Right, Katie?
Mm-hmm.
So the goals of this are in the leadership and image and community building. This is where it ties back to your council goal. And what we do in each of these groupings is try to tie the activity back to the key goals that you have. So here we have exceptional community and regional leadership, and that's the areas that you are involved in, particularly you, Mayor Carlin. And I would outline or underline exceptional. The council, under your leadership, is doing a real good job in representing the city in those important regional bodies. So we think of the Maricopa Association of Governments and the Greater Phoenix Economic Council. We heard a presentation this morning from their executive director, and he was being very complimentary of the changes that have occurred within the city in putting Peoria on the map for regional economic development, for example. And so we are funding those activities again, of course. This also funds communication. So this is an area of focusing communication, that is communication that you have as mayor and council with your constituents. And that's, of course, two-way communication. You're informing them of the policy initiatives and progress that the city's making, and you're also listening to your constituents as they're sharing their observations and questions and concerns about the city, and so that is funded here as well. The implementation of operations, efficiencies, and sustainable solutions, that's more within the management realm. Those are the things that we do in terms of the work that I and the deputy managers and my staff do in working with the departments, but also in sharing that with you and taking your direction in this important area of accountability as well. The performance metrics that we have here, and I'll take this opportunity to note, we have refreshed our performance metrics across the budget, and I hope you find them more useful. I think we got some good feedback after last session that we needed to improve those, and I think we have done that. So we have leadership and professional and regional associations, as I mentioned, sustainability, outreach, and programs, responsiveness to citizen requests. We track that and make sure that any citizen request is being responded to promptly. And we recognize excellence in the work of our staff.
Great. Then I'll talk a little bit about some of the overall, when you talk about the budgets in the areas of the mayor and council and the city manager, what are some of the major outcomes they're trying to achieve in those areas? Maintaining service levels is going to be a pretty normal refrain. You're going to see that pretty much in all areas throughout the city, because we are looking at a budget that just allows us to kind of keep at our service levels and keep things going. Some of those come with some cost increases. Some of those are things that we just continue to do, but we want to be able to maintain our service levels. We think we have adequate service levels across the areas, and where we don't, that's where you'll see us requesting some additional funding to help assist in those areas. We continue to support in the leadership and management area the sustainability efforts and the outreach. The training and professional development is extremely important. We maintain a high standard of professional excellence in the city manager's office and across the organization. That's evidenced by our credentialed city managers and evidenced by all four of our available accreditations we have and we hold in our public works department, in our community services department, and in our public safety, police, and fire departments. So what that really tells you is that they are taking all of the steps to have kind of the best practices in place, and have been identified as an organization that's very well run. So I think that's important, and we're continuing to seek the ability through a lot of our departments looking for funding to help continue with that, maybe getting more training dollars and things like that. And so we want to ensure that we continue those professional commitments. Also in this budget, as you are aware, we're having some transition in the upcoming year. There is some funding that I'm going to talk about to help with that continuity and ensure that kind of smooth transition there. And Susan will be leaving, and Andy will be moving in. And as such, Susan will be here through September working on some pretty important initiatives, such as the neighborhood services, doing an evaluation of the neighborhood services division, overseeing projects and initiatives related to the IPMC, the International Property Maintenance Code, and the Old Town Block Strategy, and of course, continue all of her efforts and being the champion of sustainability efforts in the city as well. So some of the things that were really a focus in the budget this year are to continue funding our state and federal consulting services that are needed to augment what our current governmental affairs office does with their work plan. Also to continue to support exposing our youth in Peoria to city government through our Future Town Hall Leaders Program and sending our youth delegation to the National League of Cities. Some funding to maintain continuity to ensure, again, that transition. Funding to help augment the State of the City event, and support the city's sustainability efforts and community education and outreach. Again, we have a number of important programs and services and events that we do related to sustainability. Last year we funded some of that one time. We're asking to do that again. Seeking funding to support the professional development and the commitments within the city manager's office and within the mayor and council's office to allow your assistants to get the appropriate level of training that they need and to be able to attend some of those activities and events. And lastly, to continue to conduct the audits on our internal processes and financial controls, just to ensure we're managing within the best practices in those areas as well. Any questions?
So as you can see, we did not have a lot of change in this area.
I just had a question about the audit. Is that a one-time fund this year, and you think it's going to just be every year you're going to do it? Or?
No, it's listed as one-time funding this year. It was one-time last year as well. And our intent is when we have operating budget capacity or ongoing capacity is to make it an ongoing feature. We've increased it a little bit this year over last year. We're anticipating to do a bit more in this current year than we did in the last year.
So do we have a policy that defines our audit process or procedures? Is there something in the charter?
That is a good question. Perhaps we can ask Tammy Shreve to respond to that. Tammy? Tammy is the person in my office that oversees the audits, and she just updated did the staff work on the update of the charter, and she can give you a better overview of the work that she does in the audit arena.
Mayor, Council, I do not believe it's in the city charter, although in the city code there is a provision for a city audit, for internal audits, and that's what I'm overseeing at this point.
So does it specify any kind of regulations about it? Time frame?
No, it's not that specific.
Okay.
Just that there will be audits internally, and that's what we're doing that's what I'm overseeing right now.
Okay.
And I guess just a little more on that. It's really more the way I think of it, and I think it's the way it's been operationalized. It's a best practice that on an ongoing basis we do audits of different financial controls and also areas of performance audits from time to time. This is focused primarily though on the financial piece.
Okay. And then at other times when you talk about performance, that's various departments?
Right, that is. And so we do have in the non-departmental budget, there is some money for some performance audits there, and we'll speak about that separately. And perhaps we should phrase them differently because it can be confusing to have two different types of audits.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
and I
it's
like the term best practices.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's
Yes.
very
Well,
healthy.
it absolutely is. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And Tammy's done a real good job in overseeing that. I appreciate that.
Of course.
All right.
Before we move on, are there any other questions in that administrative area? Okay, well, the next part in that grouping gets to those departments that we typically think of as administration. The city attorney and municipal court, the city clerk, communications, finance, budget, human resources, information technology, and then that non-departmental piece that I just mentioned. And I think the council, all of you have been through the budget a number of times, and I don't So therefore, I'm not providing an overview of what each of those functions does, but obviously if you have questions or comments, we're happy to respond. So within that area, we look at the council goal of enhancing current services and leadership here too. Exceptional customer service, and we pride ourselves in that, and you often hear from citizens who are pleased with the customer service they get, and I appreciate that the council recognizes that at the meetings. Thank you for doing that. We do provide excellent service, and we have a culture within the organization that reinforces good service delivery, and I'm proud of that. We have also similarly very qualified employees, and we monitor their productivity. One of the things that we do under the direction of the council for having a attractive workforce or being the employer of choice, I think is how it's been phrased, is really trying to make sure that we can attract and retain those high qualified employees. And I believe we've done a very good job at that. And we make sure that we have the funds available to have compensation delivered at a level that is going to enable that. We do market studies, market analysis, and we operationalize that both within our represented employees and our non-represented employees. And we pride ourselves in having good benefits. And when we get cost savings from programs such as the wellness program, for example, and we bring those cost savings back to our employees. If we have had a good history in the year and our losses and costs for medical insurance, for example, have gone down, and we get some savings there, we reward the employees by lowering their rates in terms of their contribution. And I think that's one of those things that allows us to maintain that employer of choice. Also having really good equipment. We also pride ourselves in having the most up-to-date equipment, and that's particularly important in public safety, which we'll talk a little bit about later on this evening. But it's not exclusively in public safety. Within our public works arena and our community services arena, where we have employees engaged in a lot of field activities, work in the community, we always want to make sure that they have outstanding equipment that is safe and efficient and comfortable for them to use. We also focus on efficiency. We're monitoring our efficiency, and in that, by that I mean we believe we know we provide really good value for our tax dollars and the fees that we collect, but that doesn't happen without focus on efficiency. And so we keep an eye on that within this area. So some of the ways that we do that is processing timely of customer service requests. We return those things fast, and that helps our customer service. We make sure that we're in full compliance with all legal, financial, and technical issues and requirements. We do internal service surveys within our departments, and we make sure that all of our major systems are up and available for our employees to use.
So I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of the overall themes associated with the administration departments, the list of departments that you saw in there. Obviously, again, Carl mentioned maintaining services and customer service are a major theme. And while these departments are not as outwardly focused, sometimes those customers are internal, and therefore we want to ensure that we have the ability as internal customers also to have the ability to perform our work and meet our objectives just as we would if we're delivering a service directly to the citizens. In some of the areas we do have some needs to address those customer service needs, such as providing additional options for our customers in our finance utilities areas, looking at doing a replacement of our listserv for our citizens through communications, as well as in the area of IT, really kind of honing in and sharpening our efforts on some of the security and the data backups and things like that. So I'll talk a little bit about that in a minute. All departments also really follow HR's lead, and that's one of the departments within here, to ensure our workforce planning efforts are up to date and that our professional development strategies are on point and that we have the ability to meet those needs in our departments. This includes administering, obviously, competitive pay for performance, our benefit package, such as healthcare, workers' comp, and our tuition reimbursement program. So those are all important programs that come out of this grouping of departments. Continual process improvement is a core value across our organization. As Carl mentioned, regular reviews of processes and practices provide a platform for the implementation of service delivery and service improvements. And then all the technology solutions, we are moving more towards a technology sort of community. You can't go anywhere without it at this point. So how we use that, our decision points about when we're going to take on different types of technology, all of those are within this area as well. So I want to talk just a little bit. For the most part, the budget approach for these departments was to work within their means, right, and maintain their services. And where they were unable to do that, we had budget requests associated. And in addition to the regular software and hardware maintenance, so in the city systems, we have a lot of systems that are supporting departments, a lot of applications that are out there, and we have regular software and hardware maintenance costs associated with that have an annual increase, as well as we place some greater emphasis on system security needs related to data backups, secondary internet connections, firewall enhancements, and again, I mentioned a replacement of the city's listserv software. And then again, due to the size of our organization and our continued growth, the last 5 years we've actually grown pretty significantly. We are at the point now where we feel we need to be extremely diligent. We've always felt this way, but maybe put a little more emphasis in the area of workplace safety. So this budget includes the addition of a safety administrator to be in charge of overseeing all of our workplace safety. We have lots of areas with lots of equipment and facilities, and we need to ensure that employees are safe. So we have that in there. In addition to that, a storekeeper to help in the areas of inventory control and our fleet services. So as we grow as a city, our fleet grows as a city, our needs for inventory grows as a city, and we've kind of hit a tipping point in those areas to be able to continue to provide consistent service. So we need to, we identified a storekeeper. We also are looking at doing, I think Carl mentioned, the process improvements and best practices, as you have said, which we would like to take a look this year at the city attorney's office. In past, we've looked at different departments at different times. This year, we're looking at focusing on the city attorney's office, working with our new city attorney to see what his ideas are and also look at, are there ways to improve what we're doing already? And then also some other items would be to increase tourism in the city as part of our economic development focus. We have some money here to do our tourism implementation plan, or at least the phase 1 of our tourism implementation plan, and some additional marketing support to help bring the city kind of to that next level for tourism and get more looks and hopefully more economic development and economic dollars coming into the city.
And let me just add a little bit more to what Katie mentioned on those two employees. These are really both growth-related employees. As our workforce has grown and the amount of material that needs to be inventoried and managed increases, both of these areas are growth-related in terms of bringing these FTEs into the budget. Mm-hmm. Any questions before we move on those areas?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Katie, for all this information. So on the IT side of it,
sure.
You hear more and more every day of cyber attacking, and are we confident that we're protected? And I see we're additional money for backup and redundancy, but are we protected security-wise?
I think that's probably an answer best given by our IT director. I can't speak directly on that. I don't know if John's available.
He's ready for me.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, members of the council, thank you. Vice Mayor, could you kind of go over your question again for me?
So I just want, with the budget requests that you have some additional funding for backup expansions. I'm concerned about the security breaches. You hear of the attacks almost daily, and especially from out of countries now seem to be tacking, not specifically Peoria, but, there's that potential, and I just want to make sure that we're prepared and our systems are protected, and our employees and our citizens, all of their data that we have information on is protected.
Absolutely, Vice Mayor, thank you. It's certainly at the forefront of our concerns. It's what keeps me up at night, is making sure that we're able to respond to any potential threats that we have to our information security that we have. So all of the supplementals that we have in here are in direct response to the changing security landscape that we're responding to. There's not anything specific that we've been threatened with or had an attack with, certainly, but we need to respond to that and make sure that we're prepared for that and doing everything we can. And I'm confident that the solutions we've identified here will continue to help keep us at the forefront of securing our data and our information.
Perfect. That's what I wanted to hear. Thank you.
Thanks.
Anyone else?
Thank you, John.
Thank you. Yep.
The next area is that group that we consider community services, a broad group of functions: recreation, library, services and programs, the public art program, our sports complex and sports facilities, community parks, and neighborhood parks, as well as maintaining our right-of-ways. And this is the first of the department areas where you'll see the little accreditation there that Katie mentioned. We're accredited in the 4 areas of municipal service delivery where accreditation is available, and it's a big level of effort to become and continue to remain accredited, but it's important. It keeps us at the forefront of efficiency and best practices in each of those service areas, so we're proud of those accreditations, and we have it in parks and recreation programs. The primary goals here, enhancing current service and community building, delivering excellent programs, services, facilities, and events, and I think all of our departments do that, but probably no department is more in the neighborhoods of our city in terms of fun and excitement and a quality of life as those in the community service arena. So these are the folks that get to have fun out in the parks and recreation programs and delivering those services, and they really do an outstanding job, and we get a lot of public response and positive feedback from citizens, as I know you do, Mayor and Council, from folks that use those services. These are funds to maintain the libraries, parks, recreation facilities, and make sure that we're delivering those services efficiently and in a cost-effective way. Just the constant refrain of community and customer service, and I won't repeat it each time it pops up, but we're proud of our customer service. And one of the ways that they do the performance metrics is through participant surveys and checking on the experience that our citizens have had with our programs, and that's just in all the different areas that we have a focus in this area.
So some of the major themes or outcomes that the Community Services Department is trying to achieve each year is to continue to provide excellent programs and facilities for citizens. There is a greater focus, obviously, that we've talked about on bringing more recreation programming to the northern part of the city. So over the last few years, we've been trying to put more events in those areas. But one of the bigger challenges we have are obviously our venues and spaces to do some of that programming. So we've not been able to provide as convenient of opportunities, but we're looking to do that this year. There's not a specific ad in the budget that's associated with this, but rather looking at ways to take some of our existing programs, some of our special events, special interest classes and activities that we have, and find those spaces in the northern part of the city where we can now have some of those facility or those activities. And again, we know that the community park will help address a lot of the outdoor, more active recreation interests that are in our northern part of the city, but we still are challenged in the areas of finding places for classes and those types of events. So, but there will be a focused effort on that this year. Also this year, there's a greater focus on fostering our arts and culture community within the city. And with that, as you know, last year we took over the operations of the Center for Performing Arts. And with that, we brought on a arts and culture manager who has been working with TheaterWorks and other arts and culture groups within the city to try to develop a program or a plan for some new arts enhancements to the community and really bring art back out to the community and partner with those in the community who are involved in that. We also talk about taking care of our assets. More visible than probably any, although maybe not more assets, but more visible than many of the assets such as streets and utilities. Community Services has all of our parks and our rec centers, and these are high-use areas that really speak to the quality of life of the neighborhoods and the people that are in there. So we want to ensure that we take the necessary steps, not only in their budget that they have for regular maintenance and repair, but we're also looking at augmenting that with some CIP dollars again this year as we did last year. And then as far as creating, beautiful spaces in our parks and having excellent programs, these require equipment and supplies, and we're constantly having to ensure that as participation increases, that we have the ability to do that. So that's another key focus area for Community Services when they look at their budget. Over the last few years, as I mentioned, the CIP has included some funding to address the repair and replacement of parks and recreation facilities and amenities, and those are in addition, as I mentioned, to the regular maintenance dollars. So in fiscal year 18, we are allocating about $1.4 million, $1.5 million to address some of those areas, and there is, needs across the city. They go all across the city. A lot of our pools need some work, those types of things. So we're budgeting for those purposes. Last fall, the voters approved the minimum wage increase, and that's resulted in some increased costs related to employees and certain vendor contracts in the city. And as those employee wage increases phase in over the next 3 years, we would anticipate we're going to continue to see that. We certainly know what that looks like for our own internal employees who are affected by that, but it's a little harder to judge what's going to happen with the contractual community and the vendors and what that's going to mean to them. So we'll be keeping an eye on that. Additionally, as our participation increases and we have facilities like new trail segments coming online, and we have adjustments to things like utility rates and those types of things, that's going to have an impact on the areas of water and electricity for Community Services. So when we talk about our ongoing dollars, much of our ongoing dollars went towards the things that we really have to do in terms of utility rate, with electricity and those types of things, so and water, and we're focused on making sure that we have what we need to maintain our current service level in those areas. Just as in the past, we're funding the special events. That we do have that in the budget again this year, so that's similar to what we've had in the last couple of years. And as the city begins to take that more substantial role in bringing art and culture to the community, we are allocating some funding from the Percent for the Arts Fund for the Veterans Memorial and some additional funding. We had some already for the Northern Community Park public art, but we're doing a little bit more because we're increasing that budget slightly, and we want to make sure that we have the right amount. And then also, as I mentioned, our new arts and culture manager will be working on programming, needs some programming dollars to do some activities, but also we're looking to add an arts and culture coordinator funded through the Percent for the Arts. So these are things that are new, but I think really augment kind of the direction Community Services is going with that program.
Let me underscore a couple of things that Katie just mentioned. These are in direct response to council direction. She mentioned that we were looking for different venues for recreation programs in the northern part of the city. And Councilmember Binsbacher, your leadership on this and identifying sites and wanting to help find ways of bringing services to the northern part of the city has been very instrumental. And we're looking forward to finding those spots and are working to do that. And that's within this budget. So also, similarly, the arts coordinator that Katie mentioned, Councilmember Hunt, this is one that you have been very instrumental in pushing and making sure that we continue to improve and enhance our arts program. And this is for the first time of using the Arts Fund to be spent in this way, but we think it's appropriate and will allow us to save the general fund, which is so tight, and it gives us an ability to enhance that service. So I just wanted to note those two things that Katie went over kind of quickly.
Councilmember Hunt?
Well, excuse me, I really want to say thank you for that. And also, between budget and you, Carl, I want to say thank you for your creative thinking on that to go to the Arts Fund. I was thinking general fund, and, you know, it was strapped, and also I was very, very pleased with this position. And, again, your creative process to supply it through a non-traditional ways. Thank you.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. Oh, no, go ahead.
No, it's just I have more in
Go ahead.
this area, but I did want to say that. Thank you.
Thank you.
John, go ahead, because I need to find where I was.
Thank you, Mayor. There's just a couple items. On the blue page, page 436, number 1603, the landscape retention basins increase. Can you explain, or have John maybe explain to me, adding 18 retention basins and adding Fletcher Heights North, are those retention basins currently under MIDS, or are these not under MIDS?
Yeah, these basins are not currently under MIDS, these, I believe, Doug? Yeah, these are the basins that are currently city-maintained basins.
Okay,
So we're looking to put these under a contract.
okay.
So that was the intent of that.
And where are they located at? Because in here, they're not described. That's what it says, but I kind of want to just get a feel for where they're located. I don't need to know where. Okay, thank you. And then as of the 32,000 for the Fletcher Heights, is that ongoing now, or is that the yearly? Ongoing? Perfect. Okay. And then on 1510-13, the Peoria Events Initiatives for 12,000, can you explain what that is? It's to support. It's to support. It was kind of the verbiage, and it was kind of some redundancy, at least in my mind.
John, would you like to come down and address that? John Sefton, Community Services
Sure.
Director.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, Vice Mayor. Specific to your event initiatives, what we've recognized through the years, all the different types of things that we need to last minute start to address, enhance, pay for, to take care of the different events that we have. So specifically offering the citizens and the visitors those unique experiences at our special events, ensuring that they are safe, by far supervised and well maintained with the events. This gives us a capacity, $12,000, to be able to, much like our quick response for the right-of-way areas, this helps us with all the different events that we have going on.
And that's exactly what I was kind of getting at. Wanted some clarification on it. Is that exactly what it was for? So thank you. That's what I was looking for. Perfect. Thank you.
Good.
Thanks, John.
Councilmember Patena?
Thank you, Mayor. John, I have a question for you. On one of your supplementals, you're showing that the CDBG improvements on Sunny Slope and Sundance Park in the amount of $500,000. And I was just talking to Karen Imig just yesterday, and she said this administration could be cutting those figures by as much as 15%. So my question to you is, do you have the money in your budget to make up the difference, or will you only be doing improvements that the budget will allow?
We have utilized the CDBG program to really augment and expedite the park improvements throughout the community, and specifically on those eligible parks. So those that are identified Sundance, and Sunny Slope are prime examples and prime fit for the CDBG funding, and we recognize that that amount may go down, but at this time we would predict that the scope would reduce for those parks in this initial year. That the others, the way that we've tightly programmed the community works programs and everything else, so it would definitely have an impact. If those dollars do not come through, we will definitely have an impact on the scope and the scale of the improvements done at those two parks.
And let me add a little bit to that too, Councilmember Patena. And I know you and I have both been involved with Community Development Block Grant Administration for years, and we see from time to time administrations or congressional discussions about reducing or eliminating community development block grants, and we're in one of those cycles again, where the new administration is proposing that, and we will watch that very closely through our Government Affairs Office, and if it turns out that there are substantial cuts to our community development block grant program, we'll be coming back to Council and discussing that in detail and how we would try to make up for it. But Peoria, like every city that gets community development block grant dollars, those funds are difficult, if not impossible, to make up. If they're eliminated from most cities in terms of transfers from the federal level, it's a big hit to municipal governments. And sometimes people think that those are only dollars that go to urban environments or big cities, but there's a lot of suburban cities like Peoria that those dollars fund important services, and in our case, a lot of it's in the social realm. That's something that we'll keep a close eye on and working through the National League of Cities and others to try to keep that funding intact, because it is real important.
Councilmember Hunt?
Yes. Okay, John, just a quick question on the libraries. There's more money being spent on Main than the branch. Is that strictly because of the size? The Main requires more librarians and probably buying more books and more technology.
Mayor, Councilmember Hunt, yes, the function of the technical services is out of the Main branch, if you will.
Oh, okay.
So there's functions out of that division that support the entire library system. So as it appears in the budget line item as though they're weighted differently, that does contribute to that appearance. But there are a number of functions, and there is an additional floor on the main library. So it does take more FTEs, the counts, the personnel to offer the services, again, 7 days a week. It takes a lot to keep the doors open and the facility safe and a great place to be.
Well, that's good to know. I didn't know that the entire thing was run out of, the technology was all run out of Maine, so that answers that question. Okay, to graffiti abatement, is that okay? It says technician for Parks South and Parks North, but who, is that for all the city other than Parks too, or Gilbert, is he under you, or, because he does fences and everything, not just parks?
Correct. So one of the very proactive things that the city of Peoria does is fund the graffiti abatement program. So that includes a very much well-equipped truck, a personnel to do such, and they, by nature of the budgeting process, he is split between the two park divisions. That just represents that he does serve the entire city, and it's very much responsive and very much collaborative with our police department in making sure that we're addressing graffiti as a crime and then covering it up appropriately as we get those
So there's one guy, and he's probably just identified out of two spots here.
Exactly. It's one person. However, we do
Covering
have,
the whole
again, the
city.
equipment to be able to support, to address that need. We don't make him work 24/7. He does get time off. So it's more of the program, but that's the FTE allocation for that specific.
And I might add, he does an amazing job. He
Thank you.
really does. He's so proactive. I just wish we could give him one color of paint to use every time he goes out, so we don't have these freckles on all the, we're going to address that in a minute. Okay, I think that's all I have.
That's it?
It's,
Anyone
it's
else?
great coverage here.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, John.
The next area is Public Works, and you can't miss the accreditation logo here. And next week, you're going to get a presentation from Stuart Kent, our Public Works Director, about how they have just been reaccredited. So it's very exciting. And 100% score that they got from the peer reviewers, which is pretty amazing. So but I won't steal his thunder from next week. So. Obviously, the Public Works Department maintains all of our facilities, maintains our streets, and does the storm drainage in the city, solid waste services, our collection of trash and recyclables. They maintain our fleet, and they operate our transit program and represent us in the regional transit body at the staff level. The goals here are, again, enhancement of current services and total planning, the operation of the city, in this case primarily in focusing on infrastructure as well as direct operations, the service delivery that they provide, the customer service that they provide that's outstanding. The metrics that we look at there are diversion rate for recycling, pavement condition rating, the city fleet in-service percentage, getting that rolling stock repaired and back on the road, and making sure that we're in compliance with non-point source discharge elimination permit requirements from EPA, among other things. And so they have, and there's a lot more metrics under these, but these are some of the big ones. And this is probably a good place for me to recognize your leadership, Councilmember Finn, in calling out our need to improve our metrics, our service enhancement, our ways of assuring that we're delivering good service. We appreciate your input and leadership there. Thank you.
So in addition to obviously maintaining current services and providing excellent customer service in all of our various service areas in Public Works, it's also important that we have employed the professional and well-trained staff. So it's important, obviously, for the city to make sure that the budget provides for proper training of our technicians and the people that are handling equipment and large equipment and those types of things. So that's a key priority in that area. Also, ensure a safe work environment by ensuring that the equipment itself is safe and that they're trained on that equipment and that the supplies that they're using are the appropriate supplies for all of the various things that they're doing. And then also, there's a number of adjustments that we've made, and I just want to remind Council over the last couple of years in some of the areas of Public Works, including we've added in a second bulk trash. And this last year, we changed the household hazardous waste collection program, and I think both of those have been quite successful. But it's important that we continue to evaluate all of our programs and see if there's areas that we can change our current practices to either make it A, more convenient for the customer and save money, or B, just because we see the demand is there for us to do more in certain areas and really kind of see what we can accomplish. So we'll look to continue to find those opportunities that add value to our customer. I want to talk a little bit about some of the budget items that you'll see in there. First one is obviously the proactive repair and maintenance of buildings, streets, and equipment. We have a very large repair and maintenance Public Works program. That's because they're in charge of maintaining the majority of our public assets that are out in the community in the terms of streets and all of our solid waste, trucks and all of those. And so, but we do have a number of programs such as the street maintenance program, the arterial road preservation and maintenance program, which we've added some additional dollars into this year. The residential road rehab, we added some more dollars into. The street maintenance program and street light replacements, which are all important and, maybe aren't always as noticed. I mean, they're noticed when the traffic is not moving as quickly, but don't always get noticed. Streetlights don't always get noticed, but we're going out and we're replacing a number of streetlights and really trying to make sure that we have safe communities The facilities and custodial support for new facilities such as the Performing Arts Center and the Pinnacle Peak Public Safety Facility would be coming online this year, so we have some of those types of things. Equipment replacements such as trailers for the solid waste and street maintenance operations. We're meeting all of our environmental mandates as it relates to street sweeping and storm drain and doing all of the basins, doing the clean outs of the basins that we need to be doing. And then I mentioned before, we're adding 350 new street lights in the upcoming year. So those are things that are, not always as noticeable, although sometimes very noticeable, but not always something that people recognize this department does. And they do it well, and they have a lot of areas of responsibility. So we're also this year, as you remember, we're going to be adding in, and I skipped it, I don't know why, the transportation system improvements associated with the fixed route. Up 83rd Avenue, that's in the budget, as well as some support for transit related to the regional Dial-A-Ride program. And if you recall, that was the program where individuals with disabilities could get an ADA, if they have the ADA card, they had the ability to get a one trip to wherever needed to go, versus in the past they'd have to do transfers when you went from city to city. This allowed them to do kind of just a one trip, a regional trip. Which is much more obviously convenient to the customer and provides a great service. But there are some costs associated with that we have to incorporate into this year's budget. So any questions?
And on that as Council is well aware, service delivery in fixed route transit is complicated in this region. And it's one of those where regional leadership, that image and leadership goal of the Council, and Vice Mayor Edwards, you represent us very well in that arena, and we appreciate that. It's a tough arena to slog through from time to time in terms of that, and all of the council has been very supportive of that, and we appreciate that.
And don't we get higher reimbursements or full reimbursements if they're ADA?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And we're seeing some good improvements. And this was a study session recently, of course, but we will be seeing the 83rd, and we'll be having additional enhancements coming along. But it's a regional service delivery model that sometimes is difficult for Peoria and other communities similarly situated across the region to get good transit service. Because of the model that's used in the region here, and it's one of those intergovernmental areas that we just have to continue to stay focused on.
I have a couple questions, Katie. Everybody has questions. Okay, so my first question is about water. So we've got cap water delivery fees in this, not to be confused with our conversation about utilities tomorrow.
Right. So following Public Works, we're going to go into utilities in the next slide. So just FYI, we'll talk a little bit about the cap water in there. But yes, that's we've split up Public Works and utilities for the purposes of presenting today, just because they are two very different functional areas. Okay. But we will be talking about the cap water supplies.
Next.
Yes.
Okay, one more question then. The residential street maintenance, you talked about an increase in that. How will that increase service delivery?
How will that increase service delivery?
The service? So our citizens say, I've got cracks in my street. Are they going to be saying that less? Are they going to see their roads recovered more often?
Yes, I'm going to ask Mr. Kent to come and answer your question.
Our Public Works Director.
With more
Stuart,
detail.
this one's for you.
Good evening. Mayor and Council, relative to the additional funding, I think what our hope is that where those streets that we see affect, obviously those residents notice it immediately. I think relative to saying, will we ever get street crack complaints, will those stop? I doubt it. I think, our goal is to look at sort of a long-term, ongoing infusion of resource. I think a lot of that will be predicated when we come back to you this fall with the street maintenance network assessment. We'll have a much better sense, and you all have a much better sense then of what the network condition is, which is good. But then laying forward, what level of street maintenance service do you all want? And if it's zero tolerance for cracks, that costs one number compared to some tolerance, for cracks as an example. But that's sort of our approach to it.
Okay, so if I understand that correctly, we're putting more money in the budget right now, but you're going to come back and talk about policy decisions later.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. And they're doing the analysis of the pavement now, the pavement management analysis, and that will be completed in the time frame that's Stuart mentioned. And what that will enable us to do is to get a good understanding of the profile of each individual street, to know when the best time to make the investment is in that street. And there's different things that you do, from filling the cracks to overlaying the streets, to get the most use out of it over time. And so that analysis will give us up-to-date current information on that, which I think is the first time we've had the entire city done for some time, right, at the same time. So that'll be a good discussion for the council.
Yes, it will. Okay, who's first? Councilmember Hunt?
Yes, thank you. Bus shade structures, is that under this department?
Yes, Mayor, Councilmember Hunt is it.
Okay, well, I understood that we're going to put up some bus shade structures. Could you talk about where those are, and do we know what they're going to be made of yet, or are you going out for bid on those?
Sure. Mayor, Councilmember Hunt, we're still working through some of the design parameters of exactly what the structures will look like. Our approach is recognizing that, one, we're adding a whole new service on 83rd Avenue, which will require, if I remember correctly, somewhere around 50 or 60 shelters. In addition, we have shelter deficiencies through the existing corridors, particularly on Peoria and Thunderbird Road. And while we not only do we have some stops that have no shelters, we have other stops that have essentially deficient shelters, shelters that need to be refurbished, could be enhanced, maybe either bigger, provide additional shade. So our approach is looking at a combination of both. We won't be providing shelters on all of 83rd Avenue through the first phase when service starts in October. But we will be looking to retrofit the 83rd Avenue, the Peoria Avenue bus stops in particular by, in some cases, maybe refreshing paint, in some cases, maybe reorientating the stop, maybe adding additional shade to the structure to provide a better enhanced experience for our transit riders.
And where is that in here? How much has been set aside for it? Just give me a page number.
Yeah, it's the regional dollars, and I would say it's just under $1 million between the two for both the 83rd Avenue and the existing route service.
Sounds like a lot, but I bet it's not when you start doling it out.
Mayor, Councilmember Hunt, I think it is a lot of money, there's no doubt. But the reality is in some of these areas where we have limited or no right-of-way, we may end up coming back to council as a part of a right-of-way acquisition conversation. So it's not just putting in a structure that might be $5,000 or $10,000. It may be an equal amount of money for right-of-way acquisition. It may be additional prepping of the site, maybe extending sidewalk in some areas so that way someone, particularly with a disability, has full access to the stop and isn't limited by being able to get around to it because they're coming on and off a curb. So there's quite a bit of engineering that has to occur with it.
And this is one of those areas with the failure of the proposition last November. We won't have all the money we need by any sense to do all the shade structures and all the shade in the community that we would want to do, but it'll be a prioritization that Stuart and his staff will be going through.
Well, I know it's going to be welcome wherever it goes in. The citizens are going to applaud. Directional signage, that comes in your department as well. I noticed the signs on the...
Yes, on the picture.
Okay. I've been asking for directional signs in Old Town for a very long time. Are they being allocated this time?
Mayor, Councilmember Hunt, relative to additional signage in the downtown, I think it's a function of, if we're looking to highlight particular amenities such as the Performing Arts Center or other amenities, or we're looking to directly get people from, say, Grand Avenue into the downtown and the best way to access it. Some of that may be controlled by ADOT relative to a signage issue obviously on Grand, but relative to the rest of it, we'll have dollars available if need be to reprogram to put some things where it's appropriate and where it really matches the character of downtown.
Okay, so you just need to know what we want and where we want it, basically, and then you'll decide if it's appropriate.
Mayor, Councilmember Hunt, I think that's exactly what I tried to say. Yeah.
Okay. And you can decide if it's appropriate, or you can do the color it's supposed to be, and
we would certainly work with council on all those sorts of things, and also making sure that any signage we put in is consistent with standard signage language, so we're not creating conflicting language with traffic or pedestrians or anything else.
Sure. Okay, thank you. This question might have been for John, I think, rather than Councilman Finn and I both had talked about having, I think it's Andy, actually, the refurbishing it wouldn't be you. We'll wait. They overlap, a lot
Sure.
of overlap, street things.
Sure.
Do you want to ask?
Yeah, you can ask the question, and we'll
Well,
get the right person here to
We both are
answer.
concerned about, and it was in the Prop 400, but the refurbishing, the refreshing along 67th and especially 75th Avenue, the bushes are and ugly, and the neighborhoods are just tired, and those main thoroughfares are really tired. And we'd talked about going all the way to what, Cactus, or even further? Thunderbird, and refreshing the, I thought it was Andy. He's confessing, he's coming down without being asked.
Andy Granger, our
And
city
then the-
engineer and
My
deputy
favorite-
city manager designate.
My favorite,
Thank you,
then,
Carl.
you might as well address it at this time, too, is the painting of the walls.
Both of those are under our capital improvement program, mayor and council, but yes, we do have 3 new projects in our capital program for this year, this current year. They're not scheduled for this fiscal year. They're scheduled, I believe, in fiscal year 19 and 20 to start. But it's for the landscaping improvements on 67th, 75th, and 83rd Avenue. Or 90, I should say 91st Avenue, sorry.
Another year before it starts?
Yeah, it's based on funding. It's a new project into our program, and so yes, based on our programming needs. However, if council wants us to look at prioritizing that further forward, we can look at that also.
Those plants have been waiting a long time. They're very tired.
We probably should look at the capital plan when it comes up.
Yeah, I think so.
Look at
Sure.
it there.
Stay tuned. Tomorrow, we'll be back tomorrow to talk about the capital improvement program.
Did Susan have a?
Did you have something to add, Susan?
Additionally, we've been looking at neighborhood walls in distressed areas for various council members upon request, which is outside of the actual CIP project. So some of those might be attended to that you've requested. In addition to that, if I might amend, just Stewart's, or maybe add a little more information, the Old Town Block Strategy is the mechanism for defining the signage, any markers that would be of significance. Chris talked to you about that, I think, last week. You'll be getting a presentation on that in early September of where we're at. So the design features and how that signage would look, the reason Stewart couldn't really answer it is it's in play right now. And we have a team that's working with the consultant to design not only signage, but kind of the look and what the whole image going forward and the marketing strategy. So that's kind of separate from street signage.
Yeah, it is, but I was thinking of the West Valley Art Museum. How many years have they been here and they have no signage, no directional signage?
That's on campus here.
Yeah, but shouldn't we direct people to them?
We'll look at
We'll
getting
work
those
on that.
signs up.
Yeah, that would be separate from the Old Town strategy.
Right.
Okay,
We can work on that item.
thank you.
Okay, Councilmember Binsbacher.
Thank you, Mayor. Question about maintenance of the medians. Does that fall under street maintenance? Landscape improvements and just
That's
maintaining it?
Mayor, Councilmember Binsbacher, that's actually under Mr. Sefton from a right-of-way maintenance standpoint, typically. If the median structure itself is damaged, it's us, but if it's the planting or the landscaping within it, then that would fall under Mr. Sefton.
Right away.
We have one more seat left.
You might want to exchange.
Thank you.
Sometimes the budget doesn't fit neatly into one department, right? That's okay.
Okay, I'm glad I didn't assume.
It's similar to the graffiti in that we budget for it within the Parks and Rec, even though it serves outside of their direct purview at times, as Councilmember Hunt mentioned.
So this has come up recently in the Mesquite District where there are, in certain areas, some of the, West Wing area in particular, where the medians need improvement or maintenance or weeding and that kind of thing. And then they might call in and request that information. Or that assistance, how do we determine which medians we're focusing on or the order? by which that happens? What's the process there?
Mayor, Councilmember Binsbacher, yes. So specific to the West Wing community, that every parcel has its history and its dynamic issues, and that is one that has a history to it, and has recently, I would say since I've been here about 3 years ago, came under the maintenance responsibility of the city. Prior to that, it was done by the HOA. It is a master planned community with very specific design guidelines and landscape design guidelines, and that is a difficult conversation to have sometimes when residents compare Lake Pleasant Parkway to something that was in another area. So we will work with the HOA, we will work directly with the residents to set some of those priorities and then work into the budget appropriate adjustments. So looking back with specific to plant selection, we have what was a very natural, native-based plant selection. Lake Pleasant Parkway, very colorful, very vibrant. So I think that's where we're getting a lot of the comparative, why does our median look like this and that median look like that? But we can certainly work with council to go through each of those areas. As far as setting priorities, we work very diligently with our subcontractors on a monthly schedule. So our bid, if you will, is for weekly trash and monthly landscape. And we are implementing and have been implementing, been aggressive on implementing sustainable landscape solutions or sustainable landscape maintenance practices, which means we go in and renovate on certain years and allow the plants to come back fully. One of the things we have not done in Peoria for a very long time is ball up or trim tightly what we call the Disney desert look. A lot of the HOAs are also starting to now take that under practice and finding, and hence the term sustainable landscape, finding much more efficient, better practices for the plants, all around. It's a good approach and an appropriate approach. So we're evolving in that direction. So setting those priorities on when plants are trimmed or aren't trimmed will be driven by that guidance, if you will, through the maintenance practices. So when there's issues, again, our objective is to always be responsive to the citizen input, work directly with, whether it be an HOA or a direct citizen, to address and understand who owns what, who's responsible for what, and then we'll address it. And just as we have done with the West Wing median as well.
Okay, so there's instances where the HOA owns it and would be responsible for paying for it, and then others where the city would be.
That is correct.
Okay.
And we tend to work very directly with, and even working through code enforcement when we get down to the weeds issue, working with code enforcement to address that communication with who's responsible for the property. The city does not go in and just take care of HOA property. We're very specific. We utilize GIS technology mapping to make sure that we've got a clear understanding and that we've communicated properly with our subcontractors to get the work accomplished.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So if I might, I realized that median was originally the HOA by mistake. It should have been ours, and so finally we took it over. And in doing so, we let them know that we maintain landscaping differently than an HOA would, natural growth and things like that. Nevertheless, there's a whole lot of weeds. We need someone to just pull them out.
Agreed. And they, on that schedule, and there are weeds, and there is that time of year when they all appear, and we are in that perfect storm of rain and then nice warm weather. So we're experiencing that across the city. So again, our important schedule is that we've got everything dialed in on a schedule, and they will be maintained within the month. So we do see it in those hotspot areas. An important budgeting aspect too that council has done now for a couple of years is for us to build the capacity. I referenced it earlier, that the quick response amount that's within our budget. When we identify specific issues, we have the financial capacity planned to be able to address high priority areas and respond quickly. So thank you.
Yeah, so did you just say you have some funds set aside for issues such as this?
He was referencing the money that we talked about a few minutes ago, that's the $12,000 additional in next year's budget. But he also said that he'll be working to get out and get the weeds that you mentioned.
Absolutely.
Good. I thought I heard
That's within the
that.
schedule. But the weeds are within the schedule to get accomplished.
Thank you.
And the weeds that come on a very regular basis are within that schedule. If there are specific areas that become a problem or added or additional issues, we have the capacity to address it quickly.
Okay. Councilmember Binswanger.
Thank you. So I used West Wing as an example because that's one that's fresh in my mind, but there's a couple of different areas. So I will go back to my notes and look at that and then share that with you in our regular discussions for follow-up.
Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Finn.
Yes, I'm sorry. At the risk of beating this horse completely into glue at this point, if we know that there are problems every year at the same time, right about now, where we get weeds, do we build something into the plan to say we're going to actually step it up in this time frame and put a little bit more into the budget to say, look, we're not going to let them run the normal monthly course during this time? Would we step it up to we're going to hit them every 2 weeks or anything? I have to agree that as I drive around, that's a little bit of a concern for me, especially right now. So.
Right, and the important aspect is recognizing what is ours and what is not ours. That
Kill 'em
is
all.
built. Kill them all, yeah.
But somebody else sort it all out.
The contracts are written as such to be able to provide that and be responsive to the weeds when those issues. That is the expectation of the contractor and under a contract to accomplish those things, and that their resources should come to that. And I do feel confident that that is the case,
okay.
And that on that schedule. That, letting weeds go for 6 weeks is atrocious, right? However, there is a quick 2-week turnaround on some of the species, if you will. So we will see weeds. It's a matter of how quickly will we respond and what is the schedule to get those accomplished. So, and every year is frankly different, depending upon the fall, how well the pre-emergent, that's also part of the contract. So utilizing pre-emergent, post-emergent, and manual removal, all of those techniques should keep and I would say that in general, our median ways do look great in comparison to a lot of other areas. But that is something that is written into the contracts and it's something that is addressed and supervised by our park maintenance facility team.
And if there's areas in your district that are, you see that you don't think that they're getting out quick enough, just let us know, and we'll be on top of it.
Councilmember Patena.
Thank you, Mayor. Stewart, I have a question for you. I've noticed that our bus stops in the city are a foot or 2 feet away from the curb and street. Has there ever been any thought, you often hear on the news where cars jump the curb and people waiting for the bus are either critically injured or killed. Mm-hmm. So my question, where space is available, has there ever been any thought given to backing those bus stops off the street more than 2 feet?
Mayor, Councilmember Patena, where we have and we can arrange for right-of-way to do that, so it's not right up against the street, but you've got, I wouldn't say it's a lot, obviously, you've got maybe 3.5 or 4 feet of sidewalk width, and the bus stop typically is then beyond that. The challenge is if we want to, say, move it back 7 feet, 8 feet off the, say, back a sidewalk even. It means creating a much bigger right-of-way area or ownership area to create the pad so there's still the connectivity from the sidewalk so people can get to it. We can't have the bus stop be an island. It needs to be connected to the rest of the city infrastructure. But that being said, particularly as we look at the refreshing of the existing stops and the adding of new stops, that's one of the big things we'll look at. The other thing I would mention is that where we have bus pullouts in the city, either that are currently constructed along 83rd Avenue but don't yet have a stop, that's where you have the real advantage to sort of create that space. And that's the real advantage, particularly at the arterial intersections. They're not obviously as available on the quarter-mile or half-mile intersections, but the arterials where you have typically the fastest traffic and the most traffic coming in, from 4 directions. That's why those bus pullouts are really critical. And I think Peoria's done a very good job through the 83rd Avenue development, long prior to bus service occurring, to creating those bus pullouts, so we weren't having to tear up the street and do it. They're already there, so we can add those stops and create that safety you're alluding to.
Councilmember Hunt.
Stewart, is there anywhere in here that addresses the purchasing of the land across Grand Avenue for a transit hub center?
Mayor, Councilmember Hunt, yes, the park and ride and the dollars associated with the acquisition of the land is in the budget, yes.
Okay, in the CIP.
In the CIP, yes.
Okay,
So you'll see it tomorrow night.
okay. Hadn't gotten that far yet.
Anything else? Vice Mayor?
Thank you. I just had two things. Stuart, first off, I want to thank you and your department for your support on the Valley Metro. Every month you're down there pitching away for Peoria and for the West Valley, but specifically Peoria. And I just want to thank you and your staff for doing that, because when I go down to the meetings, we're always front and center for the West Valley, and so I want to thank you for that. I want the residents to know that we are doing everything we possibly can to have our voice for the West Valley heard, to get as much federal dollars to get buses and transit into this area. So thank you for that. And then for the road assessment, the network assessment, I have a question on that. So you said that we'll get that study back sometime in this fall.
In the fall, yes.
How is that going to play into the CIP? Because we're looking at some CIP dollars tomorrow night for some road improvements. Are you going to kind of balance those, or are you going to look at the assessment and then balance it off of what is in the CIP to say, well, that road really doesn't need to work, but this one does? So are you going to kind of switch those things, or if it's deemed necessary?
Right, Mayor, Vice Mayor, that's an excellent question. And what our plan to do is exactly that. Because we wouldn't look to do all the residential work that's planned for all in, say, the fall, it's going to be phased out. We'd probably do a fall and a spring construction schedule. We have some neighborhoods that we're very sure need some work, and we have identified those in the CIP. But there are going to be others that are going to be sort of, what are those next level ones? What are the next priority ones? And that's where we're looking at using part of the funding in the first phase in the fall, and then the second phase in the spring, once council's seen the report, to review that. And then obviously with council's input, we'll then make any adjustments to future years in the CIP based on what the priorities are.
Perfect. Because, again, this assessment, it really takes a lot of the guesswork out of it. It basically has it all in a nice, neat package. It tells you which roads are the worst and which ones need to be addressed first. And so I really like that. It takes a lot of the personal touch out of it.
Mayor, Vice Mayor, I would agree. I think,
Yes.
and I would clarify one thing. I think the real important part of the feature is it will identify what's worst and what's best. It'll also identify, in order to maintain the network and maintain the streets that are in fair to good shape, to stay in good shape and not fall, what should be invested in first. So it's not always sort of and I know you're well aware, it's not a worst is first scenario.
Sure.
Sometimes streets that are worse may need a full reconstruction, and that's a different level of dollars than doing the preventive maintenance that we do to save a larger part of the network. But we'll go through all that with you all in the fall.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, anybody else? We can move on.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
They should have probably stayed.
The next area is utilities, as Katie mentioned a minute ago. And this is, of course, the water and wastewater plant operations and field operations that support the water and wastewater systems, and the environmental regulations and resource preservation activities that we have within both those areas. Again, it's in current, back to council goals, it's current service enhancement and total planning, this time in the arena of water and wastewater. And as you know, we have good water and wastewater plans that enable us to have the necessary water resources for a growing community and the capacity to treat wastewater as our community grows to the north. The utility infrastructure that supports that growth is a big part of it. And that's within our capital budget for the utilities, and the water resources and water quality compliance and meeting all of the EPA regulations under the Clean Water Act is also in this area as well. So the electrical costs too, as we have our facilities, our water treatment and wastewater treatment facilities use electricity. We work to keep those costs down. And we also have the services of cleaning the system as well. So these are some of the drivers that are the performance metrics that Stuart and his staff are working on in the utility arena.
Thank you. Obviously, with utilities, kind of one of the biggest focus areas for utilities is dealing with the growth in the system. It's critical to our growing city, and we're looking for well-planned infrastructure going forward. We have a number of important projects that are getting completed that are really going to create that last connection, obviously, for the city with our Northwest development that's occurring. And whether it's a plant expansion or you're adding lines or creating redundant supply, these are all elements that, the Utilities Department takes very seriously in both their planning and in related to how they're going to meet the demands for service in the future. But along with that, of course, is our existing system, and we have a very robust and complex system in place in the ground currently. So the repair, replacement, and maintenance of that system is just as important. And so there's a continual effort to try to ensure that we're putting projects in our capital program that not only expand our system, but also maintain and repair and replace some of our assets there. Additionally, wastewater, water, environmental, there's a lot of compliance requirements related to this. This is a well-regulated operation, if you will. So, we take that very seriously as a city, and we ensure that we have the resources to be able to meet all of those requirements and mandates throughout the system. So I want to just talk real quickly. There were not too many budget additions associated with water and wastewater. However, I will tell you that there was one big one, and you alluded to that earlier, Mayor, and that is with the CAP water supplies. So we do have about an $800,000 requirement to pay for not only our increased growth requirements associated with our water needs, but also our ability to recharge, our recharge requirements associated with that. So, or replenishment obligations, I should say. So that's a pretty significant request that we have in here. This is due to, obviously, the increases that CAP is experiencing. We are looking, and we'll talk a little bit more about this tomorrow, but there is the, this is kind of their first phase. There may be more, so I just want to kind of put it out there on the horizon. Is if we move into a drought type situation, which they're predicting in 19 or 20, it may be pushed out to 20. We had a really great I shouldn't say Christmas. We had a really great, Christmas present this year in a lot of water, a lot of storms, and a lot of snow. So how that impacts lake levels and things like that's yet to be determined. But we are anticipating some drought conditions in the future. There are some, just one other item on there is the Northern Arizona Forest Fund. That was to protect the Salt River and Verde River watersheds. Council approved a request to help with that funding. The second year of that, it's a 3-year commitment. The second year of that is in the budget. And that's really the sources the SRP sources that serve our Greenway water treatment facility. So those are some important ones. We're also having the Pyramid Peak water treatment facility expansion in this upcoming year. It's a huge capital project that we have. Again, that's going to be key to us being able to manage growth as it goes forward. We're also doing some improvements at Pyramid Peak. We are already current co-owners of that facility. So we're improving what exists already. We're going to have improvements to what exists already, and then we're building an additional 11 MGD in that plant that's going to be available for our citizens. So with that, I'll take any questions.
So out of this $800,000, which is pretty substantial, does that include rate increases to cover CAP's new reserve and all kinds of other new fees they're talking about?
Mayor, Council, yes, it does. The fee really breaks up into 3 pieces for $800,000. A large portion has to do with their capital cost and the repayment back to the federal government and having the reserves they need to have. And I think I know you've been well aware of those conversations. So that's the biggest component of this $800,000. There's another component related to the operating and maintenance of the system itself. And the third component is a small increase in terms of our allocation increasing by 600 acre feet. And that we're going to be using that primarily to do additional recharge. We believe that recharge is critically important, and that we ought to be continuing to do that and continue to be able to use as much of our total allotment as we possibly can. But it really gets to a much larger financial a poor structure in their financial systems that CAP has come forward with everybody and said we're going to need to increase across all their service customers. So we're bearing that same issue as every other community is.
So since they have not specified exactly how much that will be, it's just the ominous rate increase out there. Are we covering all that we think that they're going to come forward with?
Mayor, yes, for this upcoming fiscal year, I wouldn't begin to sense that this will be it. I think there will be ongoing increases in the future, but we do have the resources lined here for FY18.
Okay, good. Thank you. Anyone else? All right.
The next area is the development, planning, engineering, and economic development area. And first is planning community development. This is the department, of course, that does the community and strategic planning and also community assistance programs, neighborhood programs. Our human services program is housed here, and also our community development block grant program that we touched on a little bit earlier. Goals, again, I sound like a broken record. Current services, total planning. I won't go over those again, but we look here for some different metrics. Importantly, serving the development community. These are a cluster of departments that also do the development regulation in the city, and we work closely with the developers and homeowners to make sure that we have timely and predictable turnaround time for projects. This is also the area that helps protect and preserve our natural environment, and also the area that focuses on human services in the area of volunteers. So a lot of different things happen in these departments that touch our citizens in a lot of different ways, and they, as small as they are, they do some real important work for us. So with that, it's back to you, Katie.
Thanks. And I just wanted to put up on the screen some of the significant community outreach and assistance programs that are included as part of the Planning and Community Development Department. Obviously, we talked about CDBG, but our Neighborhood Pride program, our Neighborhood Grants program, the HOA Academy, all of our neighborhood livability initiatives. We'd have our emergency home repair, our foreclosure assistance, all of these human services. All of these things are pretty important to our community and have been successful programs. And then we also this year, just as a reminder, are doing the general plan update. And again, that's going to require some significant outreach to our citizens and involvement from them on that as well. So this was just this was an extra. This was bonus. So as far as planning and community development is concerned, they are obviously kind of the first stop for development for the most part, and they are the ones that everybody sort of starts, what if I wanted to do X, right? And they come in and talk with planning. So they really are at the forefront of our growth planning for the city and can provide a lot of that upfront information. So they continue to provide important neighborhood investments and community investments. Again, their outreach. They're, as part of our economic development EDIS program, one of the key tenets in that was also to have the best tools available for moving development through the city. And so they support those efforts with all their staffing and their knowledge and their expertise. And then we also, I do want to mention that they are bringing forward, I think you may have gotten a note the other day from Deputy City Manager Susan regarding a couple of items that are on the agenda for next week related to some fee adjustments in the area of planning, and just reminding you that those, we have not made adjustments in that area for over 20, well, almost 20 years. So this is kind of needed, and you know, it's been delayed quite a bit, but this budget would assume that we're making some of those adjustments as well. Okay. So some of the items that are in here include for a number of years, part of how we've dealt with some of the growth that's been occurring and not knowing for sure kind of where we're going to level off on some of our activities in the area of development. We've had contract planners and contract assistants in some of the areas, so we're continuing those. We would look to maybe convert those at a point in time in the future when we have the fees in place and we feel comfortable that we are able to do that. The neighborhood grant funding, again, this is an important program that allows HOAs within the community to apply for some grant funding for some projects in their neighborhoods that will assist their residents. There's a $12,000 cap on it, but it's matching funds, so they can do some significant projects in those areas. We also are looking to do some historic preservation, do some context studies and reports, and do some, maybe possibly some National Register nominations and things along that line. So some funding in there to do that. And then, again, the general plan going forward, a lot of outreach. There's no dollars that we're asking for this year, but that's a pretty significant project, so worth mentioning. Any questions? Okay. Move on.
Development and Engineering, this is the group, as you all know, that does the property acquisition, all of the engineering services of the city, both private and public. Architectural services, when we build buildings like the public safety building is currently under construction. They have architectural as well as engineering. They do the building plan review and building permit issuance. The site development work in the city, all of the traffic engineering for the city, and work closely with the Department of Transportation and our neighbors on traffic flow, and finally all the right-of-way acquisition and right-of-way inspections in the city as well. So the right-of-way realm is something that is overseen in this area too. Current services, total planning. We look at the timely review of projects. I mentioned this in planning and community development. It's similar in development and engineering, just a different type of activity, but the same kind of focus on customer service. In the capital arena, we're looking at the percent of budgets that are completed on time and within the amount that we expect, and also that we're focusing on the inspection services, and both that's, again, the private property as well as public project inspections that we've got the staff that can do that at a service level that is appropriate for the volume of work that we have.
So once again, wanting to ensure that we're meeting the performance standards, that's a very, customer service in this area is extremely important, as it was with planning as well, and I didn't have that on here, but, we've done a number of improvements over the last couple of years to our permitting process that has really provided what I think would be a high level of customer service and, has helped with all of our permitting areas and our plan review areas. We obviously have a number of very smart engineers, and they have some technical requirements and training requirements that they need to be able to uphold. So there's some focus on training and professional development. Continue to support development efforts, economic development efforts in the city. Works very closely on projects related to economic development. P83 is a perfect example. A lot of projects that sort of initiate an economic development very quickly turn over to engineering for them to manage, and so there's a real close relationship there. And then again, there's some very small fee adjustments, and I don't even know if I'd call them adjustments as much as I'd call them some new fee categories that need to be added into our fee schedule as things have changed and different types of things, solar, all these other types of things are coming in. We want to make sure that we have fees that reflect the actual cost of doing those. As far as the budget focus for engineering, there is a continuation, as I mentioned before, in some of these areas. We have some contract employees in those areas, a contract technician, an inspector, and a customer service representative to help assist in those areas until we determine that we have the need for a full-time employee. And then some traffic center equipment maintenance and replacement to some of the traffic software that's in there, our intelligent transportation systems. So we're wanting to do some updates and get those. It's been a while since that building was built, and we need to do some updates in those areas. And then lastly, planning to do an update on the infrastructure guidelines. This is kind of the guidelines that as developers come into the city and want to begin to discuss what it's going to take to what are our design guidelines? What are we going to require in terms of what they build? We're going to update those guidelines, make them a little more user-friendly, kind of take another fresh look at them and take into account some of the comments or suggestions that have been mentioned over the number of years from our different development partners. So with that, I can answer any questions.
Can you give me a little idea of what updated infrastructure guidelines means?
Sure, I could, but I bet Andy could give you an even better idea of that.
Do you want me to tell you what I'd like you to say?
Sure. That would be helpful.
Cut to the chase here. I'm hoping that we can have water reuse in more areas of our city.
Okay, that would be more of a goal. Our infrastructure design guidelines are our standards that we use for new development and new subdivisions throughout the city. So they do include reuse standards, but it has to be where it's available for reuse. So it's got to be close to a reclamation facility for the most part. But it does include water, wastewater, street design guidelines, and drainage guidelines.
Okay, so it can't be in brand-new areas, but it can be on the edge of areas that are built as we continue to build, like from Estancia east or just north from where we're from West Wing north.
Sure, we can look at that for future development, how we can incorporate that and make that a goal or an incentive for new development are you talking about more stormwater reuse or water, wastewater reuse?
I'm talking about wastewater reuse, purple pipe system that might water Community Park number 3.
Right. So that's where we have to get closer to a reclamation facility for that type of infrastructure to be in place. So we'd have to be close to the Jomax treatment plant or the Butler reclamation facility to do that. And we're looking at opportunities to expand our system where it's appropriate. But for development, it's somewhat difficult to require them to do that. But we can look at incentives for new developments.
Yeah, and it's a great goal, and as you know, we've done it where we have proximity to existing plants, like this facility, for example, here. Even though we don't think of it as being particularly close, it's close enough that we've been able to pipe the water over here and use that. And I think that's something that we're all proud of, and we can try to find some ways of doing that in the northern part of the city as it develops. I think the challenge that we get to with the community park that's under construction or will be up there shortly is just its location vis-a-vis plants. I mean, I think that's what you're getting at, right?
Yes. Yeah, that's correct.
But maybe there's some ways that we can still look to engineer that so we can bring the water over to it.
I think it's a worthy goal for sure.
It is, yeah, absolutely.
We should find a way to incorporate it
Indeed.
into our goals or guidelines or whatever policies we're creating.
Sure, indeed, right. Yeah, probably a policy goal would be a good way to address that. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. Thanks.
Good, thanks.
But just to explain that a little bit further, our infrastructure design guidelines have always been staff-driven and staff-generated. So this will be the first time that we hire a consultant to actually refine our infrastructure design guidelines. As Katie stated, we get a lot of suggestions and comments on how we can improve that document, and there's a lot of other municipalities that have hired consultants to develop it, to develop their infrastructure design guidelines. So that's what we'd like to do and what we're proposing in this budget.
And so are these guidelines going to include future development?
That's what they're for, is yes, for new development that comes in, it's the design standards that they use for roadway development, for drainage, for water and wastewater.
Water to the lake.
So that would fall more under the capital program. This is what new developments are required to do as part of their development adjacent to their property or within their property.
Okay, this is what new developments are required to do,
Yes.
not what the city is.
Exactly.
Okay,
yes.
I understand.
Yeah, it might be a bit of
see.
a semantic difference. I think of them as development standards myself. That's how we typically shorthand that. It's the standards that the city requires of new development. How will they be required to build a facility so that we can take it over as a public system?
I see.
Yep.
That's not what I want to talk about. Thank you. I'll wait.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Economic development, obviously a huge priority for the sorry, shifting gears here. And you know, you think of all the things that we do in economic development, and it's a top priority for the council, of course. But when you look at the budget, there's only 8 people in the department, right? So they're the tip of the spear, if you will, on economic development, and Scott White is the leader. But really, all of us across the city, to some degree or another, are in the economic development business. So the department size is not a reflection of the level of effort or the importance that we put on economic development. Some of the things that are done here, and by no means exclusive on this list, but business attraction, the investment zones within the city, business retention and expansion, development and real estate work, and that's encouraging development in the city and using the EDIS, the Economic Development Implementation Strategy, as a guideline, bringing the kinds of development to the community that bring the high-wage jobs that the council desires as we build out as a city, and also the workforce development. That's a huge piece of attracting the kind of investment that we want, and working regionally on a workforce development plan that's going to bring future workers for the companies that we attract is very important. And those are just some of the highlights that are done under this program. Economic development and total planning. Economic development in itself is a top goal of the council. Diversifying the local economy, and by that it's really the focus on bringing high-wage jobs, particularly in technology sector, to the area, and then the workforce development that I mentioned. What we look at here is, and it's hard to sometimes measure the metrics in this area. Of course, some of the services that we provide are easier to quantify than others, and this is one that can be a little bit difficult to quantify. You think of the number of businesses that start, for example. Well, that's not necessarily great because we could get one business, but it would be, really an outstanding example of what the council wants, and then it doesn't necessarily lend itself to counting, you might say. Also, the number of employees. We sometimes think about how many jobs are created by some of the activity that we engage in. And that's not always a great measure either, because it may not be a reflection of necessarily the synergy that comes from one business spinning off a lot of other businesses. So a little bit tough to count, but we keep trying in our metrics to get some good ideas of success and how to measure that as well.
So I'll just quickly talk about a few things. Obviously, the guidelines or the guiding document for economic development is their economic development implementation strategy. So a lot of their work plan is focused around trying to achieve some of those strategies. They also obviously want to do a good job of marketing and communications of what Peoria is, what we're about, what we're looking for. We recently had the investment forum, I think this morning, right? So, that's the kind of thing that we want to bring people in and really showcase what it is that Peoria has to offer and find out if there's some synergy between some of those operations and businesses and what the city is looking for. And then, again, professional services to enhance the operations. They are a small department, probably can't do all and everything within the amount of people that they have, but we utilize some funding to really enhance not only some of the areas where they need maybe some specific expertise, but also to just provide some operational support if we've got multiple things going on and we need to reach out and bring in some additional help. So there's some things associated with their budget that you've probably seen related to sales and marketing dollars, community promotion and investment forum. Again, we want to hold the investment forum again next year. That's the plan. In the capital program, you'll see, as we talked about last week, the Innovation and Technology Center is in the capital program. That hopefully will come to fruition. Probably fiscal year 19, I think, is when we have it in the capital program. Total planning, the land and legal services. Did you have a question? Okay. Land and legal services, continuing with that. We don't have any money requested this year. They're using some carryover from last year, but that's an example where when they need it, it's there and available for them. Technical and market studies, retail strategies, continuing to complete a retail strategy. And then also, more recently, the Small Business Development Center and the partnership we have with them and continuing that partnership into next year. With that, I can answer any questions.
I see none.
Okay. Wanted to real quickly talk about the half-cent sales tax fund before I go too far. We've talked a lot about this in the past, and I won't spend a lot of time this evening, but I wanted to just remind you what it's used for. It provides support for debt service payments, which are our MDA bonds, which are going to be your theater and the clubhouses up at the sports complex. We use it. Council has given us the direction that they'd like to be able to use one-time funds that are available in there towards economic development needs and purposes. It also supports some operating expenses associated with economic development and community promotions, as well as public safety and the sports complex. And then we also have a council-approved fund reserve that we have to meet each year as well. So there's, this has been our primary use. We've been trying to use this funding primarily for economic development purposes. And as I mentioned earlier in the last week, that we are proposing in the budget to use some of the funding here, some of the available ongoing funding to help offset the public safety pensions for fiscal year 2018 and beyond. With that, we're going to talk about public safety.
Speaking of public safety, right? Another top priority for the council, of course, is public safety. The two departments that are the main public safety providers in the city are, of course, police and fire medical. We'll begin with police. You're familiar with the divisions within the department: administrative services, patrol, communications, special operations, criminal investigation, and neighborhood services. You'll note this is another department that has the accreditation that I mentioned earlier, and here, as council will recall, we also received a gold designation for the accreditation, which was kind of a unique and special recognition that we received for how we're delivering police services. Current services enhancement and community building, but importantly, public safety stands alone as a top priority in the city. Reducing crime and the fear of crime is a top priority in police, of course. The efficiency of operations and the work in terms of working with the community, partnering with the community to solve problems, and I think that's a hallmark of our department. And Chief Minter's work in the community stands as a tribute to that. Some of the metrics we look at are how we're able to reach code compliance, because our code compliance area is also in this department. Patrol response times to emergencies, the data on violent crime per thousand, property crimes per thousand, and then clearance rates for those crimes that occur, and getting those resolved is a huge part of what we do.
So related to the police department and some of their strategic themes and outcomes that they're trying to achieve is they want to ensure they obviously have appropriate staffing levels. We're including some additional staffing in the upcoming budget, and I'll go through that in a minute. That they have all the training, the professional training that they need, that there's officers and even their non-sworn are, well-trained and have all the equipment and technology that they need in order to do their jobs to the best of their ability. And then also, they have done an excellent job of engaging with the community, referenced with their more recent outreach, homeless outreach that they've been doing, as well as all of the many programs that Chief Minter's brought to the city in terms of connecting with our faith community and connecting with some of our elderly and things like that. So continuing to focus on those areas as well. So I just mentioned this budget does propose that we add 3 additional police officers and 2 additional police service officers, as well as a victims advocate. We talked a little bit about that last week. As far as technology and equipment, numerous recommendations for some upgrades in interview technology, or interview room technology, communication software to assist with first responders as they're going out into the community, where community can voluntarily provide information about individuals that are within the home that may have disabilities or mental health issues, things like that, that would help police when they're out there doing their first response. And again, notifications of incidents that occur within the city, ways to notify you as well as notifying the appropriate folks who need to have that information. We also want to make sure you're aware we're funding for what we would call retirement transition planning. So we know that there's some retirements planned within the police department, and we want to ensure that we can maintain continuity of service. And so we're having some what we call overhire. While there's no dollars attached to that at this point, they certainly have, the budget is contemplating that they have the ability to do that if they so need it as these retirements come up. So we just wanted council to be aware that we wanted to ensure that that is something that we know is important and wanted to include in the budget. Some program support. Fortunately, there's some state and federal forfeiture funds that help augment some of the police needs in those areas of additional program support and equipment, such as surveillance van modifications, forensic equipment, technology equipment, such as a drone, and taser replacement and repairs. Those are all important aspects and equipment and things that the police department would like to have in order to do their jobs to the best of their ability. We included some resources to help address some of the challenges we have in recruiting qualified applicants, and by this will help extend our outreach to other outlets to try to do even more efficient and effective recruitment strategies. And then also, as Carl mentioned earlier, there's a funding for a police workload and deployment study to review the community data related to police operations, such as response time, staffing levels, deployment strategies, and crime rates. So really to get an outside expert to come in and look at how we're doing it. And again, go back to those best practices. What are some best practices that Peoria can implement? What are we doing well already? Where are some areas of improvement that we need to look at? So that's a key item in the budget for the upcoming year. And then, of course, some enhanced abatement dollars, building off of the success of last year. We added in some higher level abatements that we needed to do. This would continue that program and allow us to continue dealing with some of those areas in the city where we may have some dilapidated buildings or buildings that need some extra help. So
I think you're missing a couple letters there.
It did. It cut off.
Let me just underscore a couple things that Katie just mentioned. One is on that recruitment piece. As the council's aware, this is an important topic for us right now. We have vacancies in the department, and we're working to fill those vacancies. And we have officers coming out of the academies, and that's a positive. We're also looking at some lateral transfers from other departments. But we want to provide more resources to the department to increase their recruitment efforts because a lot of departments are hiring right now, and so we want to get out there and get all of the benefits of working with the Peoria Police Department, people aware of that. Because it is a very good department, a good city, and we have a lot to offer, and we're going to continue to market that aggressively. So there's some dollars there for that. The other area that she mentioned was this study, the deployment study. It's really to help us be knowledgeable about the needs as the city grows. It's as much a deployment study for now as it is for the future. It's mostly for the future, making sure that we have an opportunity to know from an independent party to come in and look at our deployment and our staffing and give us some good perspective on where we are and if we need to make any changes or alterations to the planning that's already underway. And I think it's one of those, it's a good time for us to do that as we're looking at the growth occurring in the northern part of the city. The chief and his staff have good plans, and we're adding, as Katie mentioned, 3 officers and 2 service officers and a victim's advocate. But we want to make sure that we're using the best information we can, and that's what that does. So just wanted to add a little bit to that.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Council? Vice Mayor?
Thank you, Mayor. So I have a couple questions, but it's probably better served for the chief, obviously. Oh, no.
Good evening, Mayor and Council.
Good evening. So, Chief, I have a couple of questions. So, with the additional officers, so you're looking for 3 and then 2 for the PSO. With the growth in the north area, do you see that that's adequate for? Is this like a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan? Or can you explain a little bit for that? Because with the amount of growth and the amount of calls that I'm hearing. I'm not sure that that's a correct number of officers, but I want to get your take on it.
Okay, Mayor and Vice Mayor, let me start with what we do on an annual basis as far as assessing the staffing needs for the department. We do an annual staffing report that's required for accreditation. That really kind of gives me a here and now snapshot. And one of the things that we're talking about now is we're looking at the incremental growth of the city. So we need to look at what we consider to be our future needs as the city continues to grow. And that's part of what Mr. Swenson was talking about, that we're putting together what we're referring to as a strategic growth plan. Now, what we're looking at is there's a big difference between what we need here and now and what staffing that we can use or implement incrementally. And that's kind of what we're looking at right now. To answer your question, I believe that that strategic growth plan is going to go a long way in really taking a hard look at where we are right now and where we anticipate being in the future, and what, if any, staffing needs, additional staffing needs may be required for us as we continue to grow. A couple of things that we're really looking at is, number one, with the opening of the new public safety facility up north, if there is an additional need for additional personnel, we'll have some place to house those personnel. But we also really need to keep an eye on the growth and make sure we're able to maintain an adequate staffing level up in the northern part of the city as it continues to grow.
So do you anticipate that that study to be done like in the first quarter of 18, or how long would that take?
Well, there are a couple of things that would need to be done. I assume we need to send this out to an RFP and get some responses back from companies. But we're going to try and get that done as soon as possible. Once we send that out and get it done, it's a top priority for us to make sure that we have a good strategic growth plan in place that kind of stays in line with the growth of the city.
Okay. And then another question is on your recruitment strategy with the $50,000 request. Is that enough money to entice, to do lateral moves from other departments? Can you give me an example of how many officers that $50,000 could cover?
Well, that's a good question. Let me give you a little bit more information on our lateral process, where we are right now. We're currently in a lateral process. We've got 15 lateral entry officers that have applied. Out of those 15, 7 of those individuals are in-state and are already state certified. Okay. So we're going to be bringing them in on April 10th and 11th, I believe, to kind of take a look at where we are with our laterals. Just to kind of give you an idea, we're still getting a really good response all across the country from people who are looking at the department as far as a lateral entry position. Just to give you an idea of the 15 that we're looking at in this process, kind of show you where they're coming from across the country: Alabama, Arkansas, Pennsylvania, Wyoming, Colorado, New York, Kentucky, and Florida. So we're still getting a really good response for lateral officers. In terms of your question and what we're looking at as far as enticing our lateral officers to come here, there are a couple of things that we see that our lateral officers are interested in. The first is the great reputation of the city and the quality of life here. We hear that a lot from our lateral officers regarding the quality of life here in our city. The other thing is, of course, the outstanding reputation of the department itself and being a CALEA Gold Standard accredited department. And then the other thing, of course, is the support that they see that the department receives and the members of the department receive. I mean, if you go out there and you look, I mean, our members are driving around in brand new cars and they've got the latest and greatest equipment in those cars. That's a testament to the support we continue to get from our elected officials. So those are the things that really draw lateral interest to our department.
Perfect. Thank you. That's all I have.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right. And so it's normal for us to look at this kind of thing at mid-year as well, right?
Correct.
As we've done
That's
in the
right.
past.
Yeah, we've often added resources to police in mid-year, and this will be likely this year as we're completing the study.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. Katie just reminded me that this was the last one, so. But certainly not least. Fire medical is a real important department, of course. This, too, is an accredited department, and we have the fire accreditation logo there, reminding us of that. And the council, just like police, you're very familiar with the fire medical budget, administrative services, fire operations, a big part of the budget, emergency transport, and this is something we're all very proud of, new service. This was our expanded service that we've started this year with the support of the council to bring this into the city, and it's off to a great start. Fire prevention, of course, emergency preparedness, and we don't think about that very often in Arizona. We're fortunate we don't have the hurricanes and tornadoes and earthquakes that other parts of the country have, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't always be prepared for emergencies. We are. We have exercises and work that we do to make sure that we're prepared for natural and man-made emergencies that might befall us. That's led here. Also support services, obviously, and then training, which is a huge part of our fire medical regime. Okay. Enhancing current services, again, public safety is a sort of a standalone in importance there. Emergency response times for fire suppression and EMS, hazmat and rescue are one of the top priorities in terms of our metrics. Compliance with all of the training requirements, and there are normal training requirements, and we have an even higher, I think, than normal training regime. Fire inspections are done here, and the frequency of those are monitored, and all of the accreditation that I mentioned a bit ago. Now, as Katie will talk about in a minute, and it kind of goes to what we were just talking about in the police department, you'll notice, or have noticed, of course, there are no new employees in this department. You've received budget support for employees here in the past, but I expect that there'll be a mid-year adjustment for the next phase of the patient transport or ambulance service rollout. That is, as you will recall, part of the plan. They're early still. We're evaluating that, and we have the revenue aspects, the billing aspects that are just getting started, and we need to monitor both the service delivery and also the cost recovery metrics to make sure that they're meeting objectives. But we expect that in a mid-year adjustment, you're going to see the next phase of that as the schedule was outlined earlier. So just a note before I turn back to Katie.
So again, for fire medical, some of the key themes are, again, professional and well-trained staff, the emergency ambulance transport service, and the evaluation of the emergency ambulance transport service, as Carl just mentioned. We're in the early stages of that. And then ensuring that they have the necessary safety equipment and supplies are really key to their budget. Some of the items that are budget-related that I want to bring note to is that we are looking at some vehicles associated with a couple of with our new emergency medical services. We need a vehicle for our captains so that they have the ability to get out in the field, as well as our PIO. And then facility renovations associated with Fire Station 3. They're doing some bay. This is in our capital program, some expansions of the bay, again, to help support some of the needs related to adding the emergency medical services. And then also renovating the building and repairing the building at Fire Station 6. There's some structural things that we need to look at there with one of the walls and some cracks associated with that. So we want to make sure we take care of that in the upcoming year. And then just as a side note, we did in this year's capital program fund with one-time money that was available this year the replacement of all of the self-contained breathing apparatus for fiscal year 19. So that is in the fiscal year 19 budget, but we're using available funding that we have this year to kind of put towards that. So we anticipate doing that in the upcoming year. With that, are there any other questions?
Do we have a plan in place to add more alternative response vehicles?
Do you want to take that one?
Chief?
Chief?
Katie and I could probably answer that, but it's only fair since Chief Minter got to come down that Chief Reese gets to come down too.
And they make you go last, too.
Mayor and Council, hi. Yes, we do. I mean, it's conceptual, and certainly we would like to evaluate this year the low acuity vehicle that we have and the impact that it's having on a very high acuity vehicle, which is engine 192, and then go from there as far as putting in future budgets as far as more vehicles. So, but it's still kind of conceptual.
So we're still evaluating?
Yes.
Okay.
It's doing well, though.
Yeah, it seems to be off to a real good start, right?
Yeah, very good start. So it's having an impact and reducing the numbers on a very, very busy area and reducing the cost for that engine.
Good. Good.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you're close to the service delivery, and I've watched it over the years, how the medical piece of fire medical has changed and evolved. It's been on a rapid evolution lately, and we're fortunate to be really on the cutting edge of that here, and it's really paying off. I'm very pleased with how that's working, and Chief, you're doing a great job with that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any
Right.
other questions?
Council, anything? Comments? No.
Okay, I'm going to move on to our agenda, our schedule. So today that concludes all of our operating. Certainly, if there are questions that come up related to the operating budget, we can address some of those tomorrow evening as well. So as you have a chance to digest all of this, don't be afraid to ask. But tomorrow night we're really going to focus on our utility funds and our capital improvement program. And then if there's any additional information that council would like, if you want to get a hold of me or Carl or just shoot an email, we can be sure to provide that information tomorrow as well, assuming it's something we can answer quickly.
Okay. Good. All right.
Thank you.
Is
We
that
appreciate your time tonight, and we'll see you tomorrow night.
All right. Thank you. We are adjourned.